Hello and God bless. Welcome to Gloriously Catholic. I am Glory, and today I wanted to share my revert story. Okay, so here's the tea. I am a cradle Catholic. Both of my parents are Catholic and they're also cradle Catholics. I was raised Catholic since I was born, baptized. I have all my sacraments, and so do my parents. I apologize for having to move locations, but I had to move, so anywho, we're gonna work with it. Before I really get into my whole revert story, I kind of wanted to give some background on myself. I am neurodivergent, and so I wasn't diagnosed per se, like, as a child or even as a teen. I was actually diagnosed later on as an adult with ADHD and anxiety. Why do I bring this up? Because I feel like a lot of what I was going through and I experienced, as a child, as a teen, and growing up has a lot to do with me kind of falling away from the faith, but also the revert into the faith and coming back. And so that's why I kind of wanted to mention that before I really delve into how I reverted to the faith. I remember growing up early on, going to catechism at a very young age because my mom was a catechist. And so I remember from like 3 years old going with her and just being with her while she gave the catechism classes to the older kids. And I remember myself being in catechism classes, but I do not remember too much about what was taught and what was said. And again, a lot of that goes back to me having ADHD because that's a symptom, and I don't remember a lot of things from my childhood. Not necessarily by choice, it's just my brain's a little bit different, so I don't recall a lot of things from my past, especially from my childhood, and I have a hard time remembering. Now, at around 6 years old, I think, my dad had a really, really traumatic bad accident. He was clinically dead, I don't know how many times, but he miraculously survived. But because of that, we had to move quite a bit. It was very traumatizing and dramatic experience. And so I remember moving around a lot after that. I remember my mom having to kind of stop the catechism because she had to go to work and start working because my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And since the accident with my dad happened, he was the only one working. And so my mom had to go to work so that she can take care of her family, us, my brother, my dad, and herself. And so seeing that was really hard and traumatic as it is, and not being able to see my mom as much anymore also affected me because she was always working in order to make ends meet and, take care of us. And so she stopped, doing catechism classes just because of everything that was going on, which is understandable. However, we were still going to church every Sunday. I would say that I started kind of falling away from the church at around my teen years because I got my first part-time job, and I would work on weekends. So during the week I would be in school, and weekends I would be working. And so it was pretty much like that all through high school. High school were not my best years because without knowing it at the time, I was having a lot of depression, anxiety, and I didn't know I had ADHD. I am somebody who has always been socially awkward. I do not know how to react sometimes. I don't know how to feel sometimes. I'm socially awkward. I don't know how to talk to people sometimes. And I think high school was even worse. So it was a hard and awkward time because it was hard for me to make friends and have friends, and I was working part-time. And so all of these things were influencing my falling away from the church. And because I was working on the weekends, I didn't have time to go to church. So I had stopped going to church at this point because I was in school. I would have papers and lots of homework on the weekends. I would work. I barely got any sleep. I was not involved in any religious groups or ministries or anything that could kind of help me stay in the faith or even continue learning about the faith apart from catechism and receiving all my sacraments, my first communion, confirmation, which I received all of my sacraments, including matrimony because I am married. But of course, back then, I didn't have any of that. I wasn't involved in the church, and we had moved quite a bit, so it was even harder to really look for or even have knowledge of, youth groups like that I could have been in. And then I had started working, and so that kind of took that away. Fast forwarding a little bit, once I graduated high school, I decided to join the military. I joined the Coast Guard. And that kind of spiraled into a different walk in life, a different journey that was not the best. And this is truly when I walked away, I would say, from the church and the Catholic faith. That was a little over 11 years ago. I don't want to get into specifics of everything that I experienced while I was in the Coast Guard and everything that I went through, at least not for this video. Maybe I can make some videos in the future about my experiences in the military, specifically the Coast Guard. But for the time being, my mental health was slowly deteriorating. And at joining the military, at the time, this was again like 11 years ago, a little more than 11 years ago, I will say that I did experience harassment, racism, prejudice. I was a female, I'm Hispanic, I was very tiny, so I experienced a lot that deteriorated and added more to my depression, my anxiety, and a lot of things that I've never truly spoken about. And even if I did, it was to my husband and not to very many people. And so just for the sake of this video, to kind of keep it short, those were basically some of the things that I experienced while I was in the Coast Guard. And so I was already dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression. And on top of that, I had an ex-boyfriend come back into my life who wasn't the best. He was a person that was manipulative, constantly arguing and fighting. Somebody that purposely looked and nitpicked for things just to start a fight, an argument on a daily basis. And it obviously didn't start out that way because he walked back into my life. I thought he had changed. We shared a lot of close friends, and when I spoke to those friends, they had assured me that he was in love with me, and because he was in love with me, he had changed. This was somebody that was into drugs, and we had tried the long distance because we were in a long distance relationship. We were in different states at the time, and I honestly believed that he had changed and he wanted to make things work. So we gave it a try. We were long distance, and in that time he flew out to see me, and while he visited me, we kind of decided to elope. I believe a couple months after that visit, I flew out from New Orleans to Florida, and we ended up going to the courthouse, and we eloped. I was 19 at the time, and right after we eloped, I think like a week later, I went to California for training for the Coast Guard. For 3 months that I was in California, I lived a nightmare because it was constant bickering, arguing, fighting over the phone. It was long distance. I was finding out about things that I didn't know, that I felt like I should have known. And it was a mixture of depression, anxiety. I had basically hit rock bottom in my life. I apologize for the change in location again. I had a screaming toddler that I had to take care of. So anywho, basically that elopement was a relationship that was mentally and emotionally abusive and draining and manipulative. I realized at that point that my life was potentially in danger, my career was in danger, and my depression and anxiety were at its highest they had ever been in my life. And so I knew that I had to do something, and I was at the point of just giving up. The first thing that I knew I had to do was that I had to get out of this relationship. And so that's what I did. We separated. I'm not going to get into the details of how that happened or how that went. It just was not fun, was not pretty. I filed a divorce through the courthouse in that time, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I started to pray. Now, my parents had done a retreat through the church that we went to at the time, and I'm not sure what it's translated to in English, but it's a retreat that is called Juan 23 in Spanish. So I'll try to look up what it is. Both of my parents had done the retreat and had talked to me about it multiple times. They tried to convince me to do it, but I was in a time in my life where it wasn't, again, I had fallen away from the church. I wasn't really going to church. I had been working, then I joined the military, and then this failed elopement. And so I remember telling them that I would let them know when I was ready. And so I began to pray for the first time in a long time, and I felt that God, that the Holy Spirit put in my heart that I should try this retreat that my parents had mentioned to me. My dad actually did that retreat with my husband, but that'll be a story for another time. I remember calling my mom and telling her to find out when the next date for the next retreat was so that she could sign me up because I needed to go. This retreat was life-changing for me because it was literally the moment that I accepted God back into my life and the moment that I reverted and came back to the faith. It was a weekend long. I cried and I prayed and I got so many answers, so many prayers answered, questions that I had. My heart finally felt like it was starting to heal, and I knew that I had my hope back. I had my faith back. I was able to confess because I hadn't been to a confession in such a long time, and it was like this weight that was lifted off and like a whole new light that was shining for me. And at the end, we attended Mass, and during the Mass, I was able to received the Eucharist, which was also just life changing and incredible. It's an experience that I possibly couldn't even express as much as I would want to. And I was actually able to do this after my confession and talking to the priest, because I got the okay from him, you know, knowing that I had eloped. But I know this can be a tricky subject, and I plan on doing a video of it in the future explaining, you know, annulments and divorce and all that stuff. But in my situation, after talking to the priest and after confession and everything, I was allowed to receive the Eucharist because that elopement was not seen as a valid marriage, because it was not you know, a Catholic marriage. It wasn't a sacrament. We didn't get married through the church, and I did get it annulled. So I was able to receive communion after confession. That retreat for me was truly the turning point and what helped me and guided me to revert back to the Catholic faith. And after this retreat, I started to do novenas. I started praying the rosary. I would call my parents daily, and we would even do them on the phone together. And that for me is the point where I knew that I had to do everything I possibly could to delve into relearning the Catholic faith and learning the catechism. But that'll be, again, some more future videos that I plan on doing about my journey to getting to where I am now, relearning the faith, and how I did that. I hope this video was not too long. Thank you so much for watching. I have so many ideas for future videos. I'd love to hear from you, your feedback, your thoughts, ideas, tips for future videos, what you want to see, what you want to learn. Don't forget to subscribe, and I can't wait for the next video. I'll see you in the next one. May God bless and keep you. Bye.